What's going on, Minnesota Vikings fans? It's Mitchell Renz here from Chat Sports. And coming up on today's show, we're going to look at 4 secret weapons on the Minnesota Vikings. And the roster was at 89 players. It is now at 90. I'll tell you who Minnesota signed. Sorry, it's not Ndamukong Suh. Now, anytime we talk about training camp, which is probably one of the top things that you're going to be hearing about on this channel for the simple fact of it's training camp time, means football is right around the corner, and if you're excited about training camp, if you're excited that preseason's catching up, if you're excited that the regular season's almost here, I want you to please like this video right now. The first player that I personally believe could really open up some eyes here is Andrew Booth Jr. And some good news on him is Booth has finally signed his contract with the Vikings. I know last week I came on here and I was like, man, I wish it would happen. I can understand him wanting to wait because of some of the injuries, but this was one of the players I was really, really excited that the Vikings ended up drafting out of Clemson, because my favorite stat on Andrew Booth was the fact that this young man has only given up 1 catch for more than 20 yards last season on the Clemson Tigers. Like, that's incredible. He gave up 326 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 5 PBUs, 3 INTs. I mean, to put it blank simple, people just didn't target him because they didn't need to. He took away an entire side of the field, which is what you're hoping that he's able to do for the Vikings. And we have him listed as the cornerback 4. Personally, I think his upside, I think he's better than Cameron Dantzler right now, is who I would rather have at the cornerback room. But with Dantzler being healthy, he's also been in the NFL. Booth needs to get on the field for him to have a legitimate chance to start over somebody like Dantzler, because you know Patrick Peterson is going to be the guy. So if you had to pick between Booth or Dantzler, what are you going? And I realize this is A, B, C, D, and I don't know if that's the first time it's ever happened on Chat Sports, but are you the first 2 letters in the alphabet type of person, or the 3rd and the 4th? So A, B for Andrew Booth, C, D for Cameron Dantzler. The next name that we're going to bring up here is Ed Ingram, and he signed his deal. All the rookies have now been signed. Everyone out there, see that? Woosa. It's all good now. It's ready to rock and roll. So the Vikings' entire rookie class is signed, and we talked about Booth. We talked about Ed Ingram. It is good news going forward. So now what we're going to take our next attention to is these players are starting to report to training camp. And yesterday, quarterbacks, rookies, injured players, they started to report to camp. And so what I figured I would do here is I talked to producer Patrick, talked to producer Jack, and I was like, all right, well, let's get some notable guys that ended up reporting, because technically vets don't have to go until the 26th, but I like the fact that I saw Kirk Cousins, Irv Smith Jr., Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth Jr., Ed Ingram, right? Those guys are expected. Some other names that reported that, sorry, not quite as big of a name as Kellen Mond, Sean Mannion, Amir Smith-Marset, and then Johnny Mundt. So in terms of overall news and rumors, that's what we're trying to keep you up to date here on. So what is your excitement level over some of the players that reported? If you're like, man, I am stoked, it is a solid 10, type 10. If you're like, dude, it's okay. It's not many big names there, then type 1. I'm hoping to see some higher numbers down in the chat. We do have some more Vikings news here. This one comes in from Chris Thomason. Vikings wide receiver Amir Smith-Marset looking good as he reports to training camp. He was in a walking boot when spring drills had ended due to a lower leg injury, but the Vikings had said that they expected him to be ready for training camp. And this is good news, because I'm a big fan of Amir Smith-Marset. I've been a big fan of this young man since he came out of Iowa. But for him, he's going to have a tall task ahead of him because of how deep the Vikings wide receiver room is. Jefferson, Thielen, no doubt, those are your 1 and 2. I like KJ Osborne a lot, and he's a really solid wide receiver 3, if I'm being honest. But then there's just like this cluster, and I'm not going to drop the F word, but that's what it is, and it's a good cluster. It's BC Johnson, it's Amir Smith-Marset. I've been hearing good things about Jalen Nailor out there. I mean, you have a bunch of different options, and don't sleep on the vet either of Albert Wilson, who can also offer you a little bit of availability underneath. If I was a bet man, though, I would say Amir Smith-Marset. He has the highest of potential. Now, the news that ended up going down today was the Vikings signed, big name, I know, Shaun Beyer. And when you have a team that's at 89 players, I saw the report that came out that was like, all right, they signed Beyer. It means they're not going to sign Sue. That doesn't necessarily mean it can never happen. It just means it's not happening right now. He was with the Broncos practice squad back in 2021. He's not going to make the roster if I'm being 100%. Maybe best shot is he just adds a little bit more depth. Best shot for him, he ends up on the practice squad, and if he's there, that's great. But anytime you're signed at this point in the offseason, it's usually not for the best unless you got a bigger name to keep in mind, like Ndamukong Suh. And if Sue ends up signing, I promise you, you guys are going to be getting a video. Some of the players that unfortunately were added to the PUP list, Blake Prohl and then Ryan Connolly. It depends on when these players are going to be healthy. It does not mean that they're going to be out during the regular season. I believe the date is August 23rd. Do not quote me on that. But August 23rd is the day where players have to be off the PUP list, and if they are off the PUP list, then they can participate. If not, then they're going to be out the first 4 weeks of the season. All right, y'all, that was the news here around the Minnesota Vikings. Now we're going to get into some 4 secret weapons on this team, and a lot of times when you talk about secret weapons, this is how you go from being an 8-9 football team to then winning 10, 11, maybe even 12 games and making a little bit of a deep push in the playoffs. Before I reveal some of these names, hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications. The more subs we get here on Vikings Now, the more videos that we can do. So if you want daily content, daily free Minnesota Vikings videos, take 2 seconds, look underneath the video, click that subscribe button, and then turn on those notifications. Now the secret weapons that we're going to be breaking down, USA Today gave 4 names. So I'm going to give my reaction to some of these names here, which not too surprised, judging by the fact of how many of these guys we've already talked about here and there. And the first name is running back Kene Nwangwu, who you want burst, you want athletic ability, you want somebody who when they run by, you're like, man, that guy can move. That's what you're going to get here at Nwangwu. And with the new offense that Kevin O'Connell is going to instill, you don't have this old man Mike Zimmer type of offense. You're going to see some fireworks. And hopefully you saw what you saw briefly last year when Nwangwu had those 2 kick return touchdowns, But this is what USA Today had to say about him. Nwangwu is an explosive individual with exceptional elusiveness. His ball skills in the passing game were also assured from his limited targets in 2021, and his 2 kick return touchdowns also caught the eye despite Minnesota failing to make the postseason. So in terms of some of his stats last season, a solid 4.7 yards per carry on 13 carries, 61 yards. He did have those 2 kick return touchdowns, but for him, I really think to try to make an actual impact in this team, not only does he need to have some special teams, but his versatility is pretty huge, and he needs to show that not only can he catch the football, he needs to be able to pass protect as well, because, believe it or not, that is a very important thing. Let's go to the next name here on our list for secret weapons for the Minnesota Vikings. It's Jalen Twyman, and defensive line, I mentioned Ndamukong Suh earlier in the show, because defensive tackles, the D-line in general here for Minnesota, it is a question mark. You have to be able to understand that. And USA Today had this to say because it's something that we've talked about in the Chat Sports studios. Switching to a 3-4 base defense could indicate Twyman has a prominent role to play, providing everything goes well in training camp. The lineman has experience operating on the edge or on the interior, with his potential to wreak havoc in opposing backfields evident throughout his prolific stint in college with the Panthers. All right, so now let's go to the next name here. It's Cameron Bynum, and the safety room has definitely been one of these that I've been trying to wrap my mind around a few times, and I'm not 100% sure who's going to be playing in certain situations. I actually think that you could see a situation where it's Bynum, you throw in Harrison Smith out there, Lewis Cine, because, yes, they're all safeties, but I am a believer that you try to get the best players on the field, and I think Bynum, Cine, and Harrison Smith all are 3 out of their top 11 defenders, so if you can get those guys maybe in some sort of rotation, let's make it happen. Bynum has the size, athleticism, and character to excel. He was given plenty of responsibility by the Vikings right out of the gate, appearing on 21% of the team's defensive snaps and earning an impressive 78.3 grade from Pro Football Focus of his efforts. So to me, it's going to be Cine versus Bynum in terms of who gets more snaps at the end of the day, right? Like, if I'm sitting here, you get a pie of snaps, right? You can only cut up that pie so much. I'm going to put my money on Lewis Cine, but I'd be a bad Vikings Now host if I didn't ask you. So pick a safety, y'all. CB for Cameron Bynum or LC for Lewis Cine. You draft somebody in round 1. O'Connell has already kind of hinted at Cine trying to take on a little bit more of a leadership role because he knows he's the future here. At least he's hoping that he's the future. LC or CB, let me know. The final name for the secret weapons, and if you're a Vikings fan or if you followed this show, Irv Smith Jr. is not a secret anymore. I mean, at least he shouldn't be, unless you're watching the show asleep with your thumb up your you-know-what. But if you're just a casual NFL fan, if you're watching this and you love fantasy football, I think actually one of the top targets that you should consider is Irv Smith Jr. Try to be one of those last teams. Try to be one of those last teams that take a tight end. It's all good. You don't have to be one of the first because at the end of this year, I really truly believe the value that you're going to get out of Smith Jr., who in his last 2 seasons, 66 catches, 676 yards, 7 touchdowns. Remember, last season, he battled an injury, so these are his first 2 years when he first came out of Alabama. I believe he was a second-round pick, 54 overall. Good blocker, better catcher, 6'4". He has the athletic ability. But you look at how many targets are going to be up for grabs, and you got to stay healthy. You know, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you can't get out there when it matters the most, well, then that secret weapon just kind of stays a secret. So those are our 4. So who's the biggest secret weapon on the Vikings this upcoming season? If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you. I'm going to be looking who you think is a secret weapon for Minnesota.